The Buckeye State Sheriff's Association is providing this podcast as a public service for informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the host or guest of this podcast are their own and may not reflect those of the BSSA, employees of the BSSA, or any of its officials. Any reference to a specific product, entity, opinion, issue, or other such item does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation thereof by the BSSA. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association.
I will tell you that you cannot be lured to this profession for something you see in a movie. You genuinely have to get your joy from serving people and seeing the reward and seeing the relief and seeing the confidence that they have that you're committed to them.
Welcome to the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association podcast, where we'll introduce sheriffs and deputies across Ohio. During this conversation, you'll get to know the men and women serving you and hear all about the good work being done in the Buckeye State every day. Now let's join your host, Paulding County Sheriff Jason Landers, and today's special guest.
Welcome to the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association podcast. We're here today with Sheriff Orvis Campbell from Tuscarawas County. I'm Jason Landers, the sheriff in Paulding County, host of today's podcast. Well, we're going to welcome in Orvis. You're on the telephone on the other side of Ohio from where I'm situated right here in Paulding on the Indiana state line. How's things going today, Orvis?
Things are really good here in Tuscarawas County. It got cold on us the last couple of days, but, you know, this is, I tell everybody this is the most beautiful part of the state. And, I'm lucky to be here, and it's great. We're about 20 minutes south of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which is just a kind of a place that, everybody's familiar with. So I kind of use that as a thing where Interstate 77 intersects us right down the middle. So if you pass the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we just keep coming for about 25 minutes, and you end up at my office.
That's awesome. So you're going to be episode number 11. We have 10 that are uploaded and available for people to listen to across this great state and across the country. And as I say, this thing can go across the world with the internet and the way things work today. And one of the enjoyable things for me, if you will, as the host of this podcast, is talking to you folks that are across the Buckeye State and listening to where you're situated. And, I know we have several people here locally that are listening to this podcast, and I get some questions that say, hey, that sheriff over there, where they're from, have you ever been there? And so I'm really excited to talk to you today, Orvis, because a couple reasons. One, we're similar in age, but we're far enough apart that we don't really know each other personally really well. Now, I've interviewed some of my really close friends that are sheriffs, and I've interviewed some folks that, personally we're not as connected with, but I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to talking to you. I've told a few people that, Orvis Campbell's coming on. I know I'm going to get him on here. I just really, I'm drawn to your personality when I do get to see you in person down in Columbus or otherwise. You always have a smile on your face, which makes a person approachable. You have a great handshake that's welcoming, right, when you're in that professional environment. But I was able to listen to you talk a little bit a few weeks ago when we were down at our association office for some training, and you're just one of those guys, I think, that are drawn to, and I could just sit and listen to you. So let's get started. We're not here to listen to me. Why don't you tell your listeners, as we connect you with your community, and we know you're already connected, but let's tell them, who is Orvis Campbell? Who's serving the community there over in Tuscarawas County?
Yeah. So, I grew up here. I've never lived anywhere else. The county seat here is New Philadelphia. Tuscarawas County is a great county. It's about 93,000 people. We've got the Amish on the western part. We've got some nice sized little cities in here, and the county seat New Philadelphia. That's where I went to school. Grew up here. I've got this funny first name, Orvis. My father's side of the family is from Tennessee, so that name followed us from Tennessee. But I was born here. I was named after my uncle, and this place has been my whole life. I've been really truly blessed. I grew up like many people. I grew up in a good family, but we were very, very poor. And this community really gives you a chance to succeed. When I was in high school, my house was condemned by the health department. We had to move, and I can tell you that I don't ever remember not having food, but I do remember only having bread. So it wasn't at all a charmed life financially, but I had parents that loved me, and this community here, I'll tell you, It's a community that will give everybody a chance to succeed. You just got to leap at those opportunities. So I went to New Philadelphia High School, graduated in 1990. The high school mascot were called the Quakers. And when I was in school, we called them the Fighting Quakers, which was a real oxymoron, but it's where my adult kids went. And now I have an 11-year-old. So we have 4 kids. 3 of them are in their late 20s. And then we got this little guy that's 12 next month. And you could not find a better community to raise your family in. I mean, this place here rallies around people that need support. And, we break records every year in certain aspects and charities, and we have some amazing stuff here in the community, and it's all just because of the type of people.
One of the things I like to stress is because people that knew I grew up and knew about my home and different things, people, like to congratulate you on, lifting yourself up. But I'm a firm believer that there's really no such thing as a self-made man. As we talk about how I got to where I am today, you'll see that it is only because of other people. I only had 2 employers in my life. When I was 16 years old, I got a job at a little sporting goods store. It was a privately owned store. Doug and Holly Clark hired me, and they didn't know me. It was just hired a kid that needed a job, and they became like family instantly. And they're still big supporters of mine today. They're still in the sporting goods business. They did very well for themselves in this little store that was located in Dover, Ohio, and they had a second store in Philly. But, that was where you first find out that there's people out there who are not related to you at all, but completely love and invest in you like family. And they absolutely treated me like family. They knew I was from a very poor family. They were not of the same socioeconomic class. And I was pulled in and treated just like one of them, invited to family stuff and really shown the way. And then when I turned 18, I got hired as I was working at the sporting goods store, and a judge walked in, a judge I'd never heard of or met. And he introduced himself to me, and his name is George Demas. And he said, "Hey, I understand that you're looking to be in law enforcement." And I said, "I am." I said, "I'm just a little young yet, I guess." And he said, "Well, I'm not sure that you are." And he took me to lunch, and he offered me a job as a juvenile probation officer. This was 2 weeks after I graduated high school. I didn't even know what a juvenile probation officer was. I'd never heard of it. I didn't understand the concept. But he had some ideas in the way he wanted to change his probation department. And he wanted somebody very close to the age of the youth that I'd be supervising. And he gave me that job. And man, I'll tell you, this is the guy that I was blessed to work for. Judge Demas, he was the only attorney in 27 years when he was a prosecutor that beat the famous F. Lee Bailey in a case, who had not lost the case in all those years. In fact, F. Lee Bailey called him on his retirement to recount that memory. And this guy was a giant in our community. And once again, had no care of my socioeconomic background, and actually did something for me that, was a little embarrassing to talk about when I was young, but he gave my family an opportunity to go on a vacation to where my dad's family's from. We didn't even have a car that would make it to Tennessee. And the judge loaned us a car. There was a reason he did that. It wasn't just because he came and said, "Hey, take my car." But, this judge shows up at my house and says, "Hey, you guys are taking this car. You're going to go down there and see your uncle." And we ended up doing that. I tried to say no and told him, we didn't want to do that. And he told me if I didn't borrow his car, I'd be out of a job. So that was a joke. But we ended up going to Tennessee and see my uncle that I was named after. And then a few weeks later, my uncle just unexpectedly died at the age of 45.
Wow.
So, when you get employed by somebody like that, who invests in you completely without having any connection, without wanting anything back, there was nothing I could do for this guy. It teaches you a lot about the type of person that you want to be. And I feel like those types of situations, from bars and then to Judge Demas, and then to the very first sheriff to hire me, that was a guy named Harold McKimmey, absolutely stepped in, became my father after my father passed away, and we stayed very closely connected until he passed away in his late 90s. Of course, there's hard work involved, but for me specifically, I ran into 3 giants in the community that were completely selfless, that didn't want anything. There was no political advantage for them to give me a job. My family was nobody anywhere. And they just lifted somebody out of nowhere, and that's affected me for
for my entire life, and very proud that, all of those individuals, I remained very close with.
I just sat here and listened to you speak emotionally from your heart about all those experiences, and it just resonates with me, just thinking back through my childhood and up through my teens and early 20s, and opportunities and people, mentors, people that come into your life, whether they're supposed to or they're not, and give you, just open a door for you or bring you in and hug you and love you and give you those opportunities that are sometimes you don't understand them, right? And so you might turn away from some, and you don't accept some opportunities. I know as I reflect back, I think of some of those things in my life, and then you think of the ones that you did take advantage of, and you began to understand work ethic and commitment and care and compassion, all the things that go with it, and then here comes this part of life that you didn't expect and didn't see. And I say this a lot in coaching, when you identify people like yourself in our youth, right? And of course, our job ties into that as well. But you see these youngsters that you're hopefully putting a positive influence to them, and you recognize that not everybody comes from the same background. Not everyone goes home to two parents. Not everyone goes home to a warm meal or a hug, or has ever heard "I love you" at all. And so, being there for people and recognize, being selfless. Some of the things you talked about are just, man, they're just so important. I think that's great that you share that, because it just does explain a lot about what I've seen in you when I hear you speak. Let's turn back real quick to Tusk. Let's talk about your county a little bit. You talked about, you dropped a couple names of towns there. Tell us what kind of towns are in your county, and specifically, I think I heard a couple names that might be affiliated with some success in high school sports and stuff. Talk a little bit. I think maybe you can have a university or two or something over your way, if I'm right. Talk a little bit about your county, Orvis, if you will, and what's there.
It's a great county of all kinds of blended community. I mean, the two bigger towns in the county are Dover and New Philadelphia. That's a very historic rivalry in Ohio. It's basically the second oldest high school rivalry in Ohio, behind Massillon McKinley. It's a big deal. In years past, there's been times when Cleveland Browns and Ohio State Buckeyes come and stand on the sidelines for those games, and it's a big deal. It's not that we're at that level of competition, but the level of the rivalry is something special to people who think they have a rivalry somewhere else, but don't fully understand the intensity of the Dover New Philadelphia rivalry. It's a great thing, and it's a great thing to grow up with. It's of course, when you're in school, you're easily indoctrinated to almost hate the other town. People that are Ohio State fans refer to Michigan as the team up north. Well, here, Dover and Philly fans refer to the other city as the team across the river. They rarely will say their names, but now me being 52 years old and the sheriff, I love both communities. I'm still a little loyal to New Philadelphia. That's who I root for in those games, but they're both great communities built up. On the western part of the county, we got a little town called Sugar Creek. And Sugar Creek is like stepping back in time a little bit. They call it the Little Switzerland of Ohio. It's a community surrounded by Amish. We have two parts of our county that have a large Amish connection. That Sugar Creek area borders Holmes County, which is also got a giant Amish community to it. So it's a big visitor site for people throughout Ohio who want to come and shop and visit that Amish community, and that's a unique place to be. The way the food that they cook, the things that they make, it's all very unique and very special to this community. And then we've got a bunch of other great little towns. We've got some things up to the north is Bolivar, and we've got Strasburg and Newcomerstown, and then a little area we call the Twin Cities, which is Denison and Yorksville, but just a bunch of small communities. And when you have a great county, it's because that county is made up of a bunch of small communities. There's really no magic to it. You got to make strong towns, and then strong towns make a strong county, and things like that. So, it is a great sports area. We've still got one team right now that is in the playoff. We have the Indian Valley Braves, who are still undefeated. They've got a couple of great players this year, including the number one running back in the state,
in his region. I think he's also in the top couple in the nation. I mean, ranks. So it's just definitely a sports-rich area. It's a big part of our culture. We've got about, I would say the predominance of our county is agricultural, but we do have some great manufacturing companies here and some new ones moving in, some big ones. We have one regional campus with Kent State Tuscarawas, so we have our own campus of Kent State. And even that's unique to this area. That is the only Kent State campus that is privately owned. It is not owned by Kent State. It is not state property. Kent State runs the university, but that is owned and operated locally by a board. And we keep that stuff here. It helps it fit our county. It fits our culture. And the way we like to do things. It's a great little university. I'm told it's one of the most profitable that Kent State has. But it's a very important part. Keeps our college costs down. Lets people get a top-notch education. And that university sits about a minute and a half from the sheriff's office here. So we're involved with them a lot. They got a great dean. And again, it's just something that fits right into Tuscarawas County. And I don't know how to describe Tuscarawas County, how great it is, but I tell you this, when you've come here and lived here and experienced it, then there's no explanation necessary. But I tell people all the time, I'm trying to explain how great it is. If they've never been here and never experienced, almost no explanation will suffice. It's just almost indescribably what a great place it is to live and work.
Well, I tell you, this is becoming one of my favorite questions as I kind of lay out the flow of the podcast. This is one that was added several podcasts ago, but, just learning more about your community, I think, is great. Now, people that listen to this podcast, hopefully hundreds and thousands over in Tusk, will be familiar with all those things. But as folks across the state get familiar with this podcast and tune in, they're going to learn a lot more about your county by listening to this podcast, and that's fantastic. Let's go back just a little bit more and finish up your professional career, how you got there. Where'd you attend the basic academy? And then talk to us about your tenure through law enforcement there at the sheriff's office leading up to obtaining the office of sheriff.
Yeah, so working as a juvenile probation officer when I was able to go to an academy in 1993. That was the first year that they had enrollment academy. However, I was given a commission from Sheriff McKimmey to go through that academy. And again, everything molds you, and I was just very poor. I like to stress that our family was very good. We were together, but there was just no money. And back then, the police academy only cost $1,700. I can't remember exactly what. And the county commissioners had never done this before. And I don't know if they've ever done it since, but I think at the judge's urging, they paid for my police academy. And I would have paid for it. I would have come up with the money. I would have saved. I was working. But you want to talk about an investment to a kid who didn't have any money that made me feel a great deal of loyalty and love from the county. So I attended a private police academy we called Trainers. That actually happened to be the guy that ran it, his last name, up in Massillon, Ohio. I attended that at night while I worked as a juvenile probation officer in the day. I started that academy when I was 20. I turned 21 while I was in the academy. And then I was very fortunate that shortly after the academy, I entered the reserves from the sheriff's office immediately when I graduated. But I was only in it was a couple of months, and a full-time position opened up on the road, and I ended up going into patrol. And again, having had now 3 years experience as a juvenile probation officer, which is a completely different job, but one of the things, there's always something you can take from those jobs. And one of the things that really helped me later in life, in my career, was that as a probation officer, you testify almost daily. I became comfortable on the witness stand. Now it's a little bit different in a probation case. Examinations are not as intense as when you're, the investigator of a homicide or, a case that's major like that. But it's still, there's a level of preparation and comfort that I got from that job. And I started learning all the lingo of the judicial system and became comfortable with all the major players. And here's a job that I never existed, probably would have never applied for because I didn't have any idea what it was, but it was helping me get ready. And what a fortunate experience, to work for a giant like the judge was in this community. Very important guy as far as his contributions to this community. So then I started in patrol. I'm in patrol about 3 years. And at age 24, my real dream I was chasing was I wanted to be an investigator. That was, lots of guys want to be canine or SWAT or this or that. But for me, I really wanted to be an investigator. So I got moved to the Detective Bureau at 24. And then I spent the next 24 years there. All of my ranks at that point up until chief deputy were basically investigator ranks. Sergeant, lieutenant, captain. That's where I spent my career. And, I investigated a lot of big cases. I was the lead investigator on, several dozen murders and other important crimes. But that's when, those big cases, when you're up on the witness stand, I can recall other law enforcement officers understandably nervous on the witness stand, and it was second nature to me. So it was one of those hurdles that I really didn't have to overcome because of that early job. The only positions I really worked here were patrol deputy, then to detective, and then all my ranks to the Detective Bureau for the next 20-some years. And then I was made chief deputy by the last sheriff, whose name was Walter Wilson, who, funny enough, is now the mayor of Sugar Creek. He retired, and then something came about, and he ended up running for the mayor of Sugar Creek, which is a small village, but a great little town, and he's doing a great job out there, and we remain close. So, it's amazing how your career weaves in and out, and if you just take care of people, they take care of you.
I love to hear that too, but as I interview sheriffs and hopefully get to interview a lot more, everyone has their own unique path of how they got to that first election when they were fortunate enough to get elected into that spot. And it's just fascinating, I think, to listen to the experience people have and what got them to the position they're in. So Orvis, tell us, when were you first elected? How many terms have you been in office? And were you reelected this past general election?
Yeah. Sheriff Wilson, I just mentioned, he was the sheriff for 4 terms. I worked under him, and we were actually detectives together. And then if he rose up, I kind of rose up in other positions. And then he retired 2016, and that's when I was elected for my first term. And, the one thing, if you want to be a good sheriff, is you really have to ask yourself why you want to be elected, because it can be very tempting to just think about the position as something important, and it certainly is. But I remember doing a little soul searching about why I wanted the position. What were the real goals that I wanted to accomplish, or was I just trying to get to the next step? And honestly, there was probably a little bit of both, but there were some goals that hit me that I really wanted to do some things that had not been done, and that's what then became my motivation. It was great. I worked with some great people, the other deputies, here in this building, got some fantastic employees that any sheriff in the state would steal if they could. And I'm blessed that way. But there were things I wanted to do. And then, so when I ran, I got elected. And honestly, Jason, I don't know if I should even say this, but I just got reelected for my 3rd term, that'll start in January. And I have yet to be opposed in my first, second, or third election, and that never happened here. Now, that could be a sign of the times, or that could just be that, the community has gotten to know me and trust me. I have that unique name, and I have grown up here. I mean, I have, from 18 on, this community has taken care of me. They've been my bread and butter and how I raised my family, and I've got an equal commitment to them. So hopefully that's why. But so I'm getting ready to start my 3rd term, and to be honest with you, I hate running for sheriff. Even though I haven't had a contested run, the idea of running is awful to me because it gets in the way of doing the job. Now I love community speaking. I love being in the community. I love doing all kinds of things. But the idea that you're knocking on doors and putting on pamphlets and stuff like that just gets in the way of doing the things that really matter. And it's frustrating. So, even though I want to pose, I do quite a bit of door-to-door when it's petition time and different things like that, because I try to design every time I have to fulfill my petitions to go meet people I've never met. So when I pick out my rosters of where I'm going to get my petitions filled, I don't go to the parties. I don't go to anyone like that. I knock on doors of people I never met and see what they can tell me about you. And, if you ask people, they'll give you the truth, the good and the bad. That's important to do. I'm an independent candidate. That's new for me. That's solely based off the state of politics today. I feel very strongly that our job is to make everybody feel safe, and that safety is a universal concern for everybody, and that everybody has a right to feel like their sheriff is wholly committed to them regardless of their party.
Yeah, I just had this conversation yesterday. It's kind of smiling here by myself in the studio as you're talking with a constituent yesterday and asked about party affiliations and these types of things. And that's not what this podcast is about, but it was just kind of interesting because as we're talking and just sharing stories and our beliefs and such. And I said, not one time in this office, a couple things related to that. Have we ever went to a call and said, real quick before I help you, what party are you affiliated with? I mean, that's just not what we do as sheriffs, right? And I can't imagine that. I don't care if you're in an urban setting, if you're in a rural setting like I am, just can't imagine how politics come into play. And number two, I was telling for me, I've not one time hired a person and looked at their party affiliation. I didn't look at it before they come in. I didn't ask them while they were there. It made me no difference after they were hired. Now, we're small enough that a lot of times, I know those things anyways, just because of the community that we live in. But, there's a time in politics, probably more than 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where it was a really big deal. Like if you weren't the party of the, let's just say sheriff, I don't care if it's which elected official you were, or if it was a state job. If you weren't the party affiliation of the governor at the time, you were not going to get hired into that state job. And I've seen that come down to local offices. So it's just great to hear you talk about that, because I think that is very important. I understand where politics comes into our profession. I understand when we're at times when we're lobbying for something with the legislature where, politics, it does play a role and it is important. But when we're doing the job, when your boots on the ground, when you're a police officer, a deputy, a trooper, a DNR officer, it doesn't make me any difference. I just can't imagine the scenario where politics comes into play. Let's turn back to you just a little bit. What keeps you busy? What's your interest? Do you have any hobbies? What you and your family? I mean, what are you into? What do you do in your free time, if you have any?
You know that the sheriff, and this is not a self-grandizing comment, but as sheriff, you work a lot. There's a lot of evening meetings. There's a lot of groups that you attend. There's big crimes that you're called out on all the time. And you also just got to get in to see your night staff, so you come in, you try to get into jail at night. You got to make sure those people see you more than on a website, and that they know you, and that they can come to you with concerns. So you're very busy that way. Outside of that, generally, I really don't have any hobbies other than athletics has always been a part of my family. Not saying that we're great athletes, but the older kids all played multiple sports. We seemed like we ran our tails off when there was three of them that were all very close in age. And now I've got this 11-year-old, and he's in sports. And we work out together. He hit the gym with me hard all summer long, 5:45 in the morning, which isn't bad for an 11-year-old. And there's no greater feeling. That is generally how I spend most of the time. When I am able to be at home, you just want to be with your family. And I love being in the community. And every week there's multiple engagements. But when I'm home, I just like being with them. Outside of that, I have several boards that I'm on, and the ones that are most important to me all involve kids. I'm on the local board for the United Way, the local board for the YMCA, the Noah's Hope Child Advocacy Center, which is a center designed specifically to aid law enforcement with the investigation of abuse and child sexual abuse cases. I've got some affiliation with Big Brothers Big Sisters. These things are important because kids are all that really matter. I mean, they are the future. That's where our investment should be. As far as a passion, there's a group locally called Leaders of Tomorrow. We put on a big summit every year for the youth, where hundreds and hundreds of youth come to the Performing Arts Center, Kent State, and they see basically TED Talks, some other detailed presentations of things to prepare them for life. And from that, one of the things that I'm proud of is we're now working on developing a Sheriff's Office Youth Leadership Academy that'll run about 3 months and meet regularly, and it's got a specific agenda we're kind of working on now. So those are the things that are passionate for me. Of course, I get to double dip with those. They keep me in the community. They keep me meeting the youth, which is exciting. And because I am the sheriff, I get to drag my son along with those kind of things, which helps him grow into the man I hope he turns out to be. So I get multiple benefit from those things. But that's how we spend most of our time, is just
being together and being a goofy family like a lot of people.
That's fantastic. Let's talk, Orvis, for just a minute about the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association. That's who funds this podcast, a very important organization for our success as sheriffs. Any affiliation with that, any positions, committees, anything that you serve on? Just speak for a minute, if you would, about the BSSA.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm on several committees, everything from, committees for community corrections and, we've got awards committees. We've got committees that address just about all different parts, and I'm on several of those. I'm about 2 hours away from Columbus, so I don't get down there as much as I should. The first 2 terms, I was very committed to staying here in my county so that I'm here being sheriff. But I will tell you, in those 2 terms, I have come to truly understand the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association and Bob and Mona Cornwell. When I was a young deputy and I'd hear those names, Bob and Mona, it was almost like this caricature that was down in Columbus, and I didn't know their importance. But any sheriff that stays in office a while will soon find out the value that we have in those 2. Bob Cornwell is an individual you can call who always has the answer. And it's always the right answer. If he gives you an answer, you can take it to the bank. The guy's got, over 4 decades of experience, and he's a consummate professional, always doing the right thing for the association, for the sheriffs. And what a tough job he must have. He's got 88 sheriffs that they keep from implementing crazy ideas. But, you can take him for granted really easily if you don't sit and think about what he does. Because when you call him, you get great advice on something that may only cross your career once, and some sheriffs may never cross ever, but he'll have the answer and he'll tell you exactly where to go, and then you can take that to the bank. And if you follow his advice, the newspapers are usually going to be filled with good information about your sheriff's office, because he's just the kind of guy that is wholly committed to this association and what the duties of sheriff is. There's really no other position like sheriff. And, I think, a lot of people, and God bless them, they may not know the difference between a police chief and a sheriff, but there's a huge difference. And both are important, but there's only one office of sheriff, and I could not be more proud to be part of it. So this 3rd term, what I'm hoping to do is, I've never attempted to get in any sort of positional leadership, but now I'll start to look for opportunities to serve the association a little bit more as well, because they're just so valuable. And now that I've got 8 years experience as sheriff, I feel like I've got a little more to offer them. So it's something I hope to do in the past, other than just sitting on some committees, is, looking for a role to play to give back to incoming sheriffs. We'll have some new incoming sheriffs taking office in January, and I just want to be a resource for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. You said a couple of things and a couple of words particularly that stood out to me. One was commitment. When you talk about Bob and you talk about Mona, and I just spoke about this a couple of weeks ago at our annual conference that we have. Bob's been doing this at the association over 41 years. Mona's been with the association over 44 years. And I just talked about the commitment, the consistency, the respect, the knowledge. Mona has to be and is one of the most organized individuals that I've ever been around. And some people can be offended by her organization because she's very adamant about what she wants and how she wants it. And there's kind of a running joke within the board, specifically when you get to the position of presidency, and it's follow the script. If you follow Mona's script, you are going to be successful. If you follow what Bob tells you, you're going to be successful. Sometimes he'll say, and I've listened to him say, probably said it to me when he's asked to answer, he'll go, now listen, you're not going to like my answer, but you asked me the question and I'm going to give you the answer that's going to serve you best. He's not going to mislead you. And you look at the connections. I carried on a little bit about the connections, and what I mean by connections is just the contacts, the relationships that he has across the country, to Washington, D.C., to Columbus and our legislature, and how important that is for sheriffs across Ohio specifically. You just can't beat experience and consistency and good information. Those people are very important to me, and I'm passionate about making sure that sheriffs understand what that resource is. And as you said, we're going to have 31 new sheriffs in Ohio. January, I believe it's 6th is the Monday that they'll take office. And so what we call new sheriff's training. There's 3 weeks of mandatory training, as you're well aware, that we have after we're elected sheriffs. The first 2 weeks is in the month of December, where some folks, because not everyone is fortunate like you and I, Orvis, where we come up through the organization, have an understanding about what the office of sheriff is. As you said, it's very unique. So if you're a police chief, and we're not taking anything away from them, because we have lots of sheriffs that were police chiefs, police officers, state troopers. There's a couple guys that were that worked within the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. But when you come into that seat in the sheriff's office, where you're responsible for this myriad of things that you've never had to experience in your entire law enforcement career, that sheriff training is where you learn all about it. So you'll hear things such as, what's the BSSA? It's the Good Boys Club, and I don't want nothing to do with it. Well, you sat down in that chair on the first day of sheriff school, and for the next 40 hours of your work week, you learn about the office of sheriff and the importance of what the association is for you. So I'm kind of repeating a lot of what you said or saying it in just a different way, but I like to talk a bit in this podcast about BSSA, and because one, they fund it, but two, for if you're listening to this and you are not in our profession, but you're a tax-paying citizen, maybe you're an associate member of the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association, which is maybe something else I should talk about in this podcast so folks understand how they could sign up and pay that membership fee and what you get as part of that fee. And there's some I'll write into the script here to talk about down the road. But, I think that's why it's important to spend just a little bit of time talking about BSSA so people understand it.
It's funny because Bob and Mona, they're down there and they avoid the limelight. They see themselves as true servants of the sheriffs. And that's almost a funny statement at times because there's so much we turn to them for, and just consummate professionals, and when we do a solicitation to get new associate members, and you have people that call and they say, hey, do you get this money? And I say, listen, I don't get this money, but what I get is exponentially worth it. And I really mean that. The association helps us lobby for laws that make sense for safe communities, and they really do a great job for it. And the sheriffs stand up together. And the BSSA gives us a voice. Mr. Cornwell is universally known and respected throughout the legislature and state government. And I'm telling you, when people choose to join that for that $30 to get the support and some of the benefits that they get, the information that they get, the life insurance that they get, they don't understand. They're giving us so much more. They're giving us so much of a voice in Columbus. And it's a fantastic thing, but it's amazing because I think most certainly, while I always had respect for Bob and Mona Cornwell, I certainly didn't understand their value until I sat in this chair. And there's some very tough things, some tough decisions, some predicaments that you're put in. And Bob Cornwell will always be there to guide you through those with solid advice that I tell every sheriff. You can take it to the bank if Bob Cornwell tells you. And there aren't a lot of people that are like that. And you're not required to follow Bob's advice. I would say you're foolish if you don't, but he's just giving you his best guidance, and he will never steer you wrong. So that association is not like just an empty hat association where you get together and eat lunch or anything like that. Our meetings are businesslike, they're formal, and they're driven towards our universal mission, which is serving our community. And it's never changed. At all the years, I've been here 31 years, the BSSA has held that mission, and we've not changed. We've not become trendy. We operate off of, evidence and what communities need to be safe. And Bob and Mona are just at the tip of the spear for that with our association.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they have the strength of the board of directors. It's there for them to help on the mission. And all of those things are important to keep the association where it's at as far as, respect and strength and consistency. And it's all those things that we talked about. But you said 31 years, and let's talk about that just a little bit before we take our ad break, Orvis. 31 years. Talk to us about some changes that you've seen in that period of time. So we've been doing this about the same amount of time, and I know I've personally seen some changes that I think it's interesting when I tell my kids who, are in their early 20s, that you started before the internet, meaning, the internet was there, it was out there, only certain probably people knew that it was there, but we did not use it, didn't touch it, couldn't click the button. And, heck, typewriters to computers as a transition. Tell the listeners, in 31 years, what are some of the professional changes that you've seen in this law enforcement career?
Obviously, there's so many. The equipment and training changed, the population that we serve has changed. But the one thing that, that's remained the same is you have to have a level of commitment and relevance to serve your community. And if, you look at the difference in technology, I remember, of course, where, I was fingerprinting every scene where there was a crime, and you still do some of that. But, DNA has far outweighed the use of fingerprinting. And, I've got a letter in our file that shows that according to the State Bureau of Criminal Identification, that the Tuscarawas County Sheriff's Office made the first touch DNA case in Ohio history. We like the fact that we try to remain forward-thinking and get advanced training for especially those key positions responsible for major crimes. And as you look at radio technology. I mean, there's been so many changes. I mean, when I started, you'd go on calls, there'd be no radio contacted. We have one tower in a county. Now, Tuscarawas County is a big valley, so that radio traffic didn't cover. Now we're involved in a statewide radio system where we actually have 12 towers, either in or just outside of our county that bounce our radio system off. The problems are much more difficult now. The addiction, the drugs that are related are much, much more intense and difficult. But what really never changes is just service your community. If you're committed to people, then this is a profession for you. And when I'm talking to young people, I don't really care what their collateral interests are. Some people want to be on a SWAT team or this or that. But I'm looking for people, that the same as we were 31 years ago, people who genuinely get joy out of helping other people. Now, how you help them may have changed in that 31 years, but that's the one thing that stays the same. People will cut on this younger generation, and I will tell you with 100% certainty that some of the deputies I've hired in the last few years are the very best I've seen in 31 years. I have never met people that wanted to make a difference in the community more. For me, the difficulty is making sure I stay relevant, making sure I know how to communicate with them, making sure that I can convey some of the old school methods that allow them to merge new technology, but we end up doing the same job. There are things that I could do better than them because of the way I was brought up, and there are things that I couldn't do if you put a gun to my head that they can do with very little thought. Law enforcement is going to be ever changing. The technology that's coming down the road is even scarier, as we move forward. Cellular activity tracking that we can do when there's a major crime, stuff like that. Those kind of things are great benefits. But in the end, it's still a guy who's picking up the phone to getting it done. It's still a guy who's logging on to the computer now, but it's somebody who's choosing to put those victims first to get the work done. Because you can have all the great technology, but if nobody initiates it, the crimes go unsolved. So, there are a lot of changes in law enforcement, but the truth is the most important thing is great cops still solve crime.
No, you're absolutely correct. Talk to us, if you will. With your experience in the 10 years spent in investigations, you could probably carry on about this if you choose. But is there any specific case, anything that you were involved with over that 31 years that you care to talk about that just stands out to you?
So I told you the county got 93,000 people, and I said I was the lead investigator on dozens of homicides, but there's always a few. I had a case a couple of decades ago where a couple of young girls, a couple of seniors got talked into giving a guy a ride from a local video store when we actually had video stores. And, he seemed nice, and they didn't want to give him a ride because they knew they shouldn't, and they were just renting movies to go home. And the individual ended up pulling a weapon on him and very brutally murdered one and tried to kill the other, but she survived, which, that was a case where in our local community, it was completely shocking. It wasn't a domestic-related homicide. It wasn't people who were living high-risk lives. And we've had a number of those, but it was truly shocking to the community to find out that two sweet high school kids who tried to rent a movie ended up in this horror that took place all night, and the things that they went through. The one was unfortunately murdered. The other one is still alive today and has remained close friends with me. It's somebody that I will always be a guardian angel to, and I told her that, and I don't care where she lives in our community, that when she needs law enforcement, she calls me direct. I'm her law enforcement officer, and I will take care of the rest. And I don't really care whether that's to the city or out of the city or whatnot. Relationships like that are irreplaceable. Now, when I was an investigator of all these horrible crimes, you'd see these people, you'd see the victims out and about. You'd see them in the grocery store. And that case became really important to me because, this is a little embarrassing to say, but if I saw a victim's family out in the grocery store, it didn't matter if I did a great job in solving the case and the guy went to prison forever. I would avoid them. I would literally duck to hide from them because I felt like them seeing me was an immediate reminder of the worst day of their life. And this family, this girl's parents, they were different. They would not allow that to happen. They kind of forced their life, themselves into my life, and we've become close. So that's the ultimate reward that you can get in this job, is when people found so much value in what you did with them that they became an important part of your life. These are people I never heard of or knew when a crime happened to now, we're very close. There's been others like that. We once had a little boy that was almost like a made-for-TV movie that was walking home 5 houses from his house, and a male run out of the woods, grabbed him, covered his mouth, drug him back in, raped him and beat him so bad, left him for dead. And that was a person that happened to be a transient who just was passing through from Miami, Florida. It was a tough case to crack. But those kind of cases really make you invested in your community and give you, long-lasting commitments. If you really don't need anything else, they could cut my money in half, and this job is what I'm going to do, because it just became such an important thing as to who I am as a person to have those relationships. So, yeah, there's a lot of cases, but each one of them comes with a victim. And if you solve a case but don't become attached to your victims, get to know them, like really know them, then you're really missing out. And then that makes you better for the next crime, because when you become victim-centered, that's what drives you. The idea that a bad guy gets away from doing to one of your good people, and that in your mind becomes completely unacceptable. And that's about the greatest driving force you can have.
Man, Sheriff, it just gives me goosebumps to feel your passion for the job through my headset and in the way that you speak about these things. I mean, if someone didn't know you, and there are going to be a lot of people that listen to this podcast that have no idea who you are, I suspect that they're going to feel it the same way. And right before we take our break, you've answered this already a couple different ways, but just in a parting comment before the break, what does drive you? How do you summarize that? What drives you to continue to do this? And I know you've kind of said this a few different times, a few different ways, but just bring that together for us.
It's simple. It's a genuine love for the people that you live around and want to serve them. The case I was talking about with the girl at the video store, as we were working on that case, and everybody knew I was the lead investigator. Again, that's where that unusual name Orvis can hurt you. It's on the paper every day. Everybody knows who I am. And you walk out of your house, and nothing like that had ever really happened in our community. And people are looking at you for the answer, and you feel the real weight of knowing that you're going to get it done. You've got to get it done. You cannot let this community down. So I will tell you that for me individually, having those bosses that invested in me, it has made me love this place. It has made me love going into preschools and, giving talks to preschools about all kinds of topics about safety or Red Ribbon Week in October or this or that. I mean, I genuinely love it. I try to hit those rooms with as much enthusiasm as I would any other passion in my life. And, but in the end, you just, you cannot be lured to this profession for something you see in a movie because you think you're going to kick in a door. Well, those things do happen. They're exciting when they happen, and they're fun. You genuinely have to get their joy from serving people and seeing the reward and seeing the relief and seeing the confidence that they have that you're committed to them. And I'll tell you something, people are forgiving too. I mean, there's a lot of cases go unsolved, but if you respond to them like you care and you get back to them and you are honest with them, they understand there's cases that are unsolvable or have low solvability factors, and they still support you. It's not just the people that have successes.
as long as you're, committed to them. So that's my passion. If I had to bring it down, it's every little kid I see is another one of my kids. It could be my son's friend or my son, that's how you stay focused.
I appreciate that response, Sheriff. We're going to go ahead and take a break here. We're going to come back and continue on with Sheriff Orvis Campbell from Tuscarawas County. We're going to talk more about the Sheriff's Office, particularly right after this break.
This podcast is sponsored by the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association. The BSSA is in Columbus, Ohio, and was established in 1931. The Buckeye State Sheriff's Association was formed to perpetuate an efficient organization of Ohio sheriffs and their deputies. BSSA provides an exchange of information pertaining to the duties, methods, and official practice of its members. The association also exerts such influence as may be necessary to bring about and preserve legislation in harmony with the needs of enforcement officials and the safety of the public. The BSSA supports the efforts of this podcast to promote Ohio sheriffs and deputies and their mission to serve and protect the citizens of Ohio.
Welcome back to the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association podcast. I'm Sheriff Jason Landers in Paulding County. We're going to continue on with today's podcast interview with Sheriff Orvis Campbell. He's over there in Tuscarawas County. Sheriff, talk to us more about your office specifically, if you would. Just kind of describe it for us, the size of the office, how many people you employ, kind of thing, and talk to us a bit about your office.
The sheriff's office here, was built in 1992. It includes the offices and the jail. So, you're talking about 32 years old. It's still a very nice building in great shape. I've got great county commissioners all along the way that have helped us, maintain it properly and things like that. Every sheriff's office is a little different the way counties are structured. We all have the same core responsibilities. For this office here, I have about 118 people. I'm really close to fully staffed. I've got just a couple openings in different divisions, but I've got, of course, the jail division is the largest, and I also run the 911 center here locally, so that's in this building. And I've got the patrol division and the detective division and the civil division, and then I've got court services, which is, I've got a group of guys who just work security up at the Common Pleas Courthouse and County Office Building. And, you put all those things together and it creates quite a staff. We still do things the way we did 31 years ago. We still cook all our own meals. I employ 4 cooks who cook all the meals here for the inmates. We don't farm any of that out. And, it gives us 4 more people to get a good county job with a retirement and not necessarily a great wage, but a decent wage for the type of work that they're in. And we get to know and control the type of people who are handling our food and taking care of the inmates and, stuff like that. So, we're always recruiting. Things have really looked up lately recruiting. There's been a dry spell, but now things are going great, with respect to we hire. I don't know that we do anything real different from other offices other than I'm really looking for people, that fit this office. And, one of the things you love is when somebody's from this community. I mean, there's just, when they're committed to their community, that is hard for me as a sheriff to implement. That's something that a lot of times their parents or grandparents have already done for me. They're committed to this community, and they want to serve this community, and they have a buy-in that someone who, maybe traveled from several counties away just isn't going to have. I know a lot of agencies have people that live in multiple counties. I've got a few that live in another county too, but most of my people are from here, work here. And when I do hire from someone outside the area, I'm looking for somebody that came similar area. I don't want them to be surprised about what it's like to work in an area that got 93,000 people total. We're nearly 600 square miles, but we are predominantly agriculture. We're, I would say, a common sense community built up of a bunch of smaller common sense communities. And I want people to fit that. So we look to recruit hard in the type of people that will work here. I don't mean it clannish. We like the fact that somebody's gone away and had opportunities to bring back experiences to make us better. But that feeling that, listen, I'm not just working here. This is my home. I'm going to protect because this is my family lives here. And, we hit all the things that everybody else does. We do our community fairs. We do stuff like that. I do sometimes I send some people to the police academy and I try to grab them before they're even commissioned. When I find somebody that I think that is exactly who we're looking for, then I'll try to snag them. I've got a couple of civilian positions. I could snag them and put them in until they're ready to go to the academy. The whole thing I'm hoping to produce is I want the community to feel like, all right, this guy's one of us. He's here. He understands. He gets it. He cares about, the safety here. The other thing I look for, whether or not they volunteer. And you'll catch people off guard with that question. There's actually a whole series of questions in an initial interview about the volunteering, because the truth is that you can about all the exciting things about law enforcement. But when you break it down, it's just serving other people, which is just like volunteering. So I'm looking for people that have a heart for that. And then I'm happy to get them all the other experiences that they want with all the specialized units that we have nowadays in law enforcement. I'm happy to get them those experiences, but I want to make sure that, that they've already proven to me that, they want to serve the community. I tell people that the best predictor of future behavior is recent, relevant behavior. So we spend a lot of time looking at what they did recently to see if they're going to be a fit for the office. And sometimes when I think there's someone who may be technically proficient, but just doesn't feel like they have that commitment to serve, then you just sometimes let the position stay open a little longer, as it's important to get a good fit. You don't want people coming in and out of the agency. You want people committed here. You want people that are proud to explain to people how to pronounce Tuscarawas, which is a common thing we have to do here. It's shortened to Tuck a lot, but we want people that, will stand up, and it's almost like fighting words if you say anything bad about this county.
If I was to hashtag this podcast interview, I've determined on my piece of paper it would be pride, because when you speak, I just feel the sense of pride that you have in your community. Talking as proud as I am about this county, I'm like you in a lot of ways, and to save time, I don't carry on as much as maybe I would like to about the same types of things you said. I'm born and raised here in this community, live here. I've changed, I would say, school districts from where I grew up and graduated, and where I've lived and coached, and the other communities and how important they are, which were once rivals that are now friends as you grow, and people you competed against are now, friends, and different types of things. And our kids are competing against each other, but we're friends. And I hope that I would come across as proud of my community as you do, man. But that's one thing I just think on this sheet that I keep my notes on is just the pride that you have within your community. When you talk about recruiting, I know you have a university that's right there. You talk about sponsoring people and sending them through the academy, which gets them back within your organization. I like to steal these things from folks as I listen to them and ask this question on a podcast. Recruiting, do you have videos? Do you have career days? I mean, what kind of things? Are there anything unique maybe that you do, or that are just, I don't like the word routine in our business, but types of strategies that you use for recruiting good people into your organization?
Obviously I'm the most well-known person. I'm in the news a lot. My picture's out there a lot. I'm doing a lot of public speaking, but I'm not necessarily the most valuable player. I'm just the most well-known, and I've got some young deputies that are just fantastic in every way, and I mean every way. They're probably far more proficient than I was at their age, and their attitude is perfect. Their commitment is perfect. So one of the things I think is important is let them do the work for you. They are people that, I can pick a couple of names out of my head right now, and these are people that everybody is immediately drawn to. And I'm not fortunate enough to have anybody that's just in recruit. But when we throw those people into youngsters who may be considering law enforcement, they're immediately drawn in. And I think I've got the stack here locally as compared to some of the other police departments that I got the people that are going to draw in other people. And so it's like that success begets success. Great members inspire other people and bring them in. So you just got to be willing to let go of the limelight yourself and let some of these young guys who speak the language to other young guys a little more similarly just do the work. And I can't tell you how many people, for example, I just agreed to hire a guy yesterday. He'll start here mid-December. He from a community in the next county, already plans on moving here. And it was one of my guys who was teaching at a police academy that went up there. And it was actually the police academy. It was at the University of Akron. And I said, well, what brings you here? Because you've never lived here. And he said, listen,
This candidate is spit polished. Everybody would take him. There is nobody that's not going to hire this guy. His polygraph, everything is perfect. Why did he come here? Because one of his instructors was so inspiring. And he said a lot of instructors go up there and they were talking about their agency, sometimes in a negative way. But he said, your guy just said this. He made this feel like the greatest place you could ever work. And he goes, the entire second half of my academy, this is the only place I could think of. And he'd never been here before. He'd never lived in our county. He only lives about 10 minutes out of our county. But he'd never been here to have any kind of experience with us. Well, that's the real key to recruiting is you've got to get your good guys doing it. You treat your good employees well, you treat them fairly, and they'll bring in others because they want other people. They want other good people. They don't want to work with goofballs. They want good cops that are going to come in here and make this agency something they can be proud of, and I think that's really the key to doing is I got to do is be fair and be honest with my staff. Sometimes we get what we want, sometimes we don't. But if you treat them well, they'll go out and get you the people that you need. So I hear about some recruiting nightmares throughout the state. There's been some dry spells, especially for positions in the jail, but those were short-lived, and we're doing very well.
Man, that's fantastic. I appreciate your answer to that question, and I think it just continues on as again, the way you talk about the agency there in Tuscarawas County. How about any programming? Are there any things that are going on within your agency that you're having success with? Maybe it doesn't really matter if it's something new or old that works. Anything that you care to talk about on that point?
Yeah, so I told you I came up to investigations, and one of the things I wanted to do when I became sheriff and without costing the county a fortune was I created a full-time crime scene technician program, and it cost me some money over years, and but I'm very proud now for a county of our size. We have a very highly qualified full-time crime scene technician that is only the 34th in Ohio to have his national and international credentials in the state of Ohio, and he works right here, which means when we have a big crime, he's committed here. When we have a murder, we may hold that house for a week. Well, I can tell you one specific case where a different agency used a different crime scene unit, and then we ended up taking the case over. They had no evidence collected that matched any type of suspect, and then our crime scene group went in, and we ended up with almost 30 matching pieces of DNA that put the victim to the suspect and both to the scene, which is that triangle that you really want. And you can only really do that when you have local control. When my guy knows you don't leave that, I don't care if you're there 2 weeks, you're going to remove every trap in the house. We're going to find out if there's blood in the trap. And that's the kind of thing you can do with local control. So, and that's the kind of thing that the sheriff is responsible for. So I don't farm any of it. I don't call in any outside crime scene units unless it's to an officer-involved shooting. We do it ourselves. That's what they pay us to do. And I expect all of my people to put in the hours to get it done. No excuses. And they do. And they take great pride in it. Some of the other things that we're very involved in that I had a lot of pride in is some of my other folks now have taken a great deal of ownership into, youth leadership in the community and with these academies. And we have a coalition here trying to work on addiction. And, we're also doing some things. We're doing one area that we've seen a lot of growth in is frauds and scams. A lot of elderly people getting hit with big money scams. So, we've recently partnered with a video company. And not only do we give a lot of live talks, but we're producing a video. We're going to share that with the BSSA if they choose to do anything with it. But we're putting together and we're just inundating our community with this information of how far the scams are perpetrated and the common things that almost always exist at every one of them. But people lose big money, tens of thousands, and in our case, hundreds of thousands, and as much as $500,000 from one victim. It's just unbearable as a sheriff to see that continue to happen. So, we're just trying to stay relevant every single day. And instead of us naming a priority as to how we're going to serve the community really determined that. We just got to have our ears open. The community tells us what they need, and then we go plug that hole. Sometimes it's working with youth, sometimes it's battling addiction, and sometimes it's just good old-fashioned police work, which is still the best type of public relations. Because if your community trusts you to come out and do the work to solve their burglary, there is no better public relations. I mean, they can create all the classes on telling you how to do it, but just being trustworthy and being there when the community needs you, that's the best public relations there are, and that's the job of the sheriff.
You know, it's interesting hearing you talk about some of these things. And when you went towards the, you know, the fraud and scams, it is really devastating to see or hear some of the, and a lot of times it is elderly, and not always. And I guess depending on what elderly means to you and how you define that, I guess. But, you know, this morning in our prosecutors meeting where we all meet as a team, law enforcement, those that choose to attend, talking about a scam situation my team's investigating with Bitcoin. I mean, is this something that's going on over your way where these people are coming into our gas stations, wherever we have a few of these Bitcoin ATM machines, and dumping literally thousands of dollars of cash into this machine when they're falling victim to these scams?
Yeah, we just had one, a professional young person, less than 30, a registered nurse, about $12,000 victim. And when you break it down for them, first of all, talking to these individuals is very difficult at the beginning because they get sucked in with a genuine sense of urgency. And once that sense of urgency or anxiety kicks in, a lot of the information that they're hearing doesn't really stick. And when you try to break it down, they often can't answer you some of those initial questions as to how they got sucked in. And then when you start to break it down, you'll just see almost utter shame and disappointment, which is devastating to me as someone who's trying to help a victim. But they realize at that point, like, oh my gosh, there's no way I should have fallen for that. But, you know, these guys are professionals. This is all they do. Some guy sitting in a country overseas who's just perfecting his ability to sound urgent, to sound completely official, and to sound like if you don't now, you know, horrific things are going to happen, or this once in a lifetime opportunity is going to pass. And when you talk to people about it, they chuckle. They almost laugh at the victims. But it's every day people are falling for this for large amounts of money. So it's not until you're drawn in that situation and you're being told that something is so important and would set the sense of urgency and your anxiety's raised, that everybody starts to make bad decisions. When their anxiety's up, they can't think clearly. And that's what these scammers are experts at doing. So, you know, we're looking to take a bigger role. We've got several more presentations done. We got this video we're going to put out, you know, because we want people to be able to sit in their living room. If we got people, a lot of these scams take place over the phone. So if we got people who are mobile, we want them able to see it in their home. So we're going to be working with our library system, with our senior centers, with just every single, you know, assisted living place. Anybody that'll hear it, they'll get sick of us knocking on the door trying to educate the public on frauds and scams so that they know, because every single one of them have a few common denominators that if you just recognize those and stop, slow down, you can avoid all the loss.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me is how, you know, intimidating these people can be, and that sense of urgency, and, you know, to convince somebody who we believe is of their normal mind to get up out of their chair, out of their house, hang up the phone, drive to the Dollar General, buy a $500 gift card to wherever, drive back home, scratch the numbers off, call the number back, and give them all the pertaining information to, let's say, keep their electric bill on, because this person told them if they don't pay it immediately, buy a credit or, you know, buy a gift card to some Dunkin' Donuts, they're going to lose their power. And they convince people to do this. And then when they get into the mind, and I would say elderly in some of the cases we've had, it's a life-changing event. They spend their whole life savings when they believe in this person, and they build a relationship with this person who sometimes can't even speak English, and they've convinced them that they're best friends and they don't live too far away and they're someday going to meet. And man, it is devastating. We could probably do an entire podcast with the right people just talking about scam scenarios that we could put out to all those. It sounds like you're on this with a video, and I'm excited to see that, because man, is it an important topic.
You know, obviously it's me on camera, which isn't necessarily what you may want for Covington County, but it's so important for us to get the word out. You know, one of the cases, it was a person who is a little older, but who I feel is of very sound mind. It's a highly educated person
But she only got taken, I say only, because I know it wasn't devastating financially to them for $5,000. But this person had my cell phone number in her phone. And she's since been attempted to be a victim again, and she called me, and I was able to intervene with that. So, but that first time, if she just called me, if she just in our 911 center, our folks are intimately a bit familiar with how these scams take place. We train our dispatchers on it, and we do things. But these people are so convincing, and we always got to remember who the bad guy is. It's never the victim's fault. It's the bad guy's fault. But this is how terrorism gets funded, and a lot of other really bad things get funded. And they're good at it.
Yeah, they are.
Those are some of the things that we're working on now, the youth leadership and, frauds and scams. But really, when it comes down to what's our priority, it never, ever changes. It's you have a crime victim, you want to serve them well. And if you serve them well, they'll have confidence in you. And then they bring you back information that you need to make the community safer. That's just the way this job works. It's not political. It's about serving one victim during that one crime and serving them well. And then that's how you build community trust.
Absolutely. Sheriff, as we start to wrap things up, is there anything we left out, anything you care to talk about before we end the interview?
No, other than, I would say that as a sheriff, something that you want your community here, if they hear this podcast, is I realize how blessed I am to have a community that supports us. Not just me, but my deputies. There's been times throughout this nation where it seems as though law enforcement has not been well liked. Well, during those times, my guys they had great frustration too, but their frustration was a little bit different. Their frustration was they couldn't go to a place to have it without somebody stepping up and paying for them. And you want to talk about when two entities work together, when you are invested in your law enforcement like that, believe me, that's returned. And they feel a great commitment back to you. So we just want everybody to know that, the sheriffs in Ohio, we're blessed to have our communities. We don't always agree, but we generally do, because we all have the priority of safety. And, we truly feel blessed to serve the community here in Tuscarawas County, who I guarantee you, if there was an outside attack on law enforcement, there'd be an awful lot of civilians here lining up to have our backs. And that's a great feeling. And we want to make sure that they have the same feeling from us.
Man, you're right, Orvis. And I got to tell you, man, you got me all worked up. I'm excited to find my way over towards New Philadelphia, get over there to Tusk and just see what it's all about, man. And I think it's going to be self-explanatory once I get myself there. And I want you to write this down. I want to make my way over there in 2025. I'm going to get over there. I'm going to see you. I want to see your office. I want to see your people and just the pride that you have in your agency. Well, Sheriff Campbell, I'd like to thank you for being a part of today's episode. We would like to thank the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association for their sponsorship. For Sheriff Orvis Campbell, I'm Jason Landers, and I'll be right back here next month featuring another Ohio sheriff or deputy on the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association podcast.
Hi, my name is Bob Cornwell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association, located in Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. It was brought to you by the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association. With this podcast, we are striving to introduce you to sheriffs and deputies from around the state of Ohio and recognize their great work they do every day for the citizens of Ohio. For more information about our organization, Google Buckeye State Sheriff. Thank you.